We've been talking quite a bit about the new version of HTML, which is AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages. There is a technology associated with AMP which is also designed to accelerate the experience of a user on a mobile device and eventually on any device, desktop or mobile, over time. And it's called Progressive Web Apps, abbreviated PWAs. So this movement is sponsored by Google and a few large companies on the internet. It's an open source technology, which is pretty much standard. It aims to become a standard, just like HTML does not belong to a particular company. It is implemented by many companies, and then they share the code base, and then all the websites run a language, HTML, that is standard, that's portable. Progressive web apps aim to do the same thing. And in this post and discussion, we look at what a progressive web app is. So essentially, a progressive web app is the evolution of the phone apps that we all have on our phones right now as of 2017. We all have a whole lot of apps on our phones, maybe 100, 200 per device. And each of these apps take a lot of storage. On the other hand, these apps are great because when we log in, we know that we stay logged in. When we're offline, these apps still work somewhat, and they've made the experience easy. We get notifications from these apps. They do more than what you would get out of a mobile browser. Our phones have a mobile browser, but we only use them right now to access websites that don't have apps. So really, the progressive web apps are the convergence of going to a mobile browser and accessing a website and using an app-like functionality where you get these notifications, you can access part of it offline, and basically these three things, the classic app, the browser, and the progressive app is basically the convergence of these two. So this is a very simple table. It's probably missing a few details, but it gives the idea. It gives the idea of going from the left to the right. So when today we have these mobile apps, they exist for a reason, because obviously we don't want to have our phones clogged and full of app storage. And even as the phone storage increases, the size of the apps is increasing, and there's only so many apps we can have on our phones, and that's an issue. So the beauty of a mobile app, and that's why we download them, is because they have a shell. They have an icon. We get notifications. We log in, and then we stay logged in for a long time. And generally, these apps are faster. They're somewhat fast than the what you would get out of a mobile browser, where you have multiple seconds in most cases to get the contents. The classic mobile apps for developers, if you're a developer, if you're a site owner, it's very difficult. You've got an iOS marketplace and an iOS app SDK, a software development kit, and you have to build an app for iPhones. And then you have to build an app for iPads. And then if you want to do Android apps, then you have to go to the Android marketplace, and then you have to release that app there, and you have to maintain that app there. And the same goes for Windows. And as all of these devices change, and as the technology gets updated, developers always have to maintain all these versions of their apps, and it's really, really hard to make them cross-compatible, cross-functional. So unfortunately, the classic mobile app model has not delivered on a build once strategy, and you build it once as a developer and it works on all the devices, your app is going to work natively on iOS, on Android. There are tools to do this, but they haven't really delivered fully. And then of course we talked about the fact that each of these apps consume your phone storage, and there's a lot of repurposing and duplication of the first app you download, the second app you download, there's some base services that they all re-download. We all re-download every time. So the mobile browser ideally is just one app. Just one app. Take Google Chrome. You take Google Chrome once, and then you access all the websites from that one app, which is the mobile browser. Unfortunately, it's very limited. It doesn't give you a shell on the websites. It doesn't give you, easy ways to get icons saved to your phones. You don't get notifications. We can log in through the mobile browser, but these logins tend to expire, and they're more difficult because they're not always scaled responsively to the size of the device. So the persistent login is somewhat limited on a mobile browser. Then the content, of course, like on the classic mobile app, depends on how fast that content is going to get to you. And then there's always, of course, the core shell of the site to re-download every time. But at least it doesn't take storage. The progressive web apps are this new technology where you basically you turn a website into an app, and you basically store offline on the browser, in the browser, the shell, which is, for example, the site's logo, the navigation, the frame around the contents, everything that's not going to change frequently. That's the shell. And that shell is available offline. It takes a minimal amount of space. It goes to the phone, and now your website on the mobile browser becomes an app. That icon also becomes the pathway to an app functionality. When you click on that icon, you get to the app capability, online or offline. You get the login, you get the notifications, and as a user, you can start having a very rich experience. You can decide what you want to hear about from this website or this company. You can decide what you want to opt out of easily with a panel and ways every time you get a notification to opt into the notifications and then opt out of that notification. Progressive web apps are fast because they require AMP. It is not allowed to do a progressive web app if the content is not running AMP HTML. So that guarantees a fast user experience in addition to the fact that the shell is already loaded. And then we've got this beauty of the mobile browser, which is that if you make your progressive web apps once, in theory, and the implementations right now, not all browsers are supporting PWAs, but hopefully that's coming. If you build a progressive web app, just like a site works on all the browsers right now, that app should work without you having to redo it for iOS, redo it for Android, redo it for Windows. It's just going to run on all the browsers, on all the devices. So from a developer perspective, it's wonderful. You can focus on functions, you can focus on features, you can focus on innovating for the users, and you don't have to focus on releasing the same thing 5 times, and then the next week there's an update and you have to recode and re-release that update, and this constant churn as a developer to make that app on multiple platforms. And then, of course, from the user side, on phone storage, it means that if we have 100 apps, they're going to take much less space on the device. So that's also wonderful for the user experience. And maybe that means that users are going to run more apps on the phone because of the packing density and the efficiency on the phone storage. So that's what progressive web apps do. They're very new. If you're a developer or a site owner, think about how you're going to be integrating that. How are you going to be turning your website over time into an app? It's a wonderful opportunity. The technology today is not there. There are very few plugins for progressive web apps. The technologies are just coming to the market. Even AMP is just coming into the market and maturing. So progressive web apps are something that I think the community looks forward to. Whether it's implemented as the PWA standard, it becomes the standard, or something else takes over. Like, for example, Facebook and their instant articles. Facebook has its own platform, its own app, and now you get content through Facebook, through an instant article, and it's like a progressive web app because that content can be stored offline. It loads fast. You've got the app shell, the app icon. Facebook has pretty much done its own progressive web app inside its app. So we don't know exactly how this is all going to pan out, who's going to be the winner, but these technologies are coming to market and it's very exciting. All right, cheers.